Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing really well and welcome back to another video on Amazon's New World MMO. So it slightly caught me off guard, but we had a really exciting community letter published last night from Amazon's game director, Scot, in which he really goes on to dig into some of the community feedback and criticism, particularly around sort of the PvP and PvE content and balance, and kind of how some of this criticism has been directed towards the game. And he sort of goes on to set out his vision of what he wants the game to be and how he wants to achieve that. So first up, he confirms that the alpha testing has been running for around about 1 month now. And sort of on a side note, I really hope they start to increase the number of players testing the alpha. I know a lot of people, myself included, really want to sort of get in there and throw a bit of time into this game. But he also talks about the amount of feedback that has been collected so far. Plus, he claims that the sort of concerns and opinion of the community are being taken as on board, as they're really trying to find this sort of balance of coexistence between PvE and PvP players. With that in mind, Scot goes on to talk about the Factions at War update that supposedly dropped on the alpha on the 5th of March, but that as us mere commoners,
I'm your king!
Well, I didn't vote for you!
only learned about via the March to Battle developer blog over on the New World website. This seems to be the sort of core battle and core PvP mechanics that they're sort of centering a lot of the game around. So when I say this, I kind of refer to things such as the missions that require PvP flagging to complete, as well as the fact that these missions are actually really going to be a requirement to be able to initiate territory war battles, and grab land for your company and faction. It's not just going to be, require a set amount of gold to declare war. You're also going to have to be completing these factional missions. And they're then saying that this is hopefully going to entice some of those normally PvE only players into sort of dabbling a little bit into some of the PvP sort of requirements. He then goes on to talk about how this has all been built around a set of these 5 core principles. The first of these principles is this: it's supposed to be a massive supernatural world that actively confronts the players that attempt to conquer it. I think we're starting to see this talked about more and more as they develop further PvE content. We even get a mention of invasions actually later on in this very developer blog that we're looking at now. And we have also seen some recent articles from some of the news players such as Minor MMO, which talks about seeing raids and world bosses in the alpha. I didn't actually get time to cover this that specific article. It's actually really quite an interesting article. But if you want to know more about that, then you really want to check out Sir Medieval's video covering it. I'll link that in the notes down below. Well worth checking out. But my point is, I feel there is actually an awareness now at Amazon that following their change from this open world PvP game, there has been a bit of a shortage of PvE content to fill the gap of the systems that they've changed. But I do feel they are now actively responding and trying to fill that gap, which I certainly think is a good thing. I just hope they can get the PvE content sufficiently developed and sufficiently built up so that it's ready in time for release. The second and third core principle revolve around sort of a flexible, skill-based tactical combat system, as well as a progression system that kind of fosters player cooperation. Personally, I think I'll kind of reserve judgment on the combat till I actually get to go hands-on with it. We've only seen very limited combat footage, and I think it's kind of hard to make an accurate judgment based on kind of what we've had so far. But I think we certainly have seen evidence of the game trying to sort of foster this group cooperation with, things such as town projects, company land conquest, corrupted breaches, questing, etc. And we kind of see this crop up in the fourth point that they talk about as well, which is about working towards group goals as well as intersecting game mechanics. And I think this kind of comes back to Amazon's idea of having PvE and PvE players both sort of having to work together to achieve their goals. The worry is, I guess this is probably going to be a pretty difficult concept to balance out. How do you ensure that, say, a crafter contributes towards a PvP player's existence? I guess you'd probably argue that the equipment they craft is going to be put on the market, and since it's going to be a fully player-driven economy, it's going to work in that way. But that's going to be some mighty fine balancing. If something is too easy to craft and the market gets flooded, then you kind of ruin the economic balance of the game. So I think it's something they're going to have to be really careful to make sure they balance out properly if they really do want game mechanics to cross over properly, or truly cross over from PvP to PvE. The final point actually refers to territory conquest and player-run governments. This to me just cuts back to the faction and company battles that they are already staking their core PvP mechanics around, kind of as well as all the sort of ancillary, influence PvP system, the goal for PvP kills and the PvP damage scaling that they are working on to sort of try and incentivize those PvE players to take that step, to take that high-risk strategy and to toggle PvP mode on. So rather than forcing PvP, they're really actively trying to go for sort of more the carrot rather than the stick. I did find it interesting that as we move on to the latter part of the article, I actually found it quite amusing to see Scot actually mention that they don't want to build a theme park MMO. I've just seen this phrase thrown around so much over the past month, sort of on Twitter, Reddit and Discord, and I think as we've sort of gone through February and now into March, and we're seeing more and more evidence of the game kind of moving into something different. I think we've actually got quite a lot more mechanics and concepts that seem to be getting fairly rapidly introduced. And I mean, in all honesty, I think the game is starting to feel like it has a bit of a plan, a direction of travel that was certainly perhaps a bit more missing earlier on. And, it's really great to see that. And I think as we're going to carry on, hopefully they're going to sort of refine on this concept. And the fact that they have a PvP, PvE sort of concept to combine the two systems is a really good start. One point of interest towards the end of the article is the mention that despite the recent changes, to try and sort of revive the PvP aspects of the game and try and bring some of the PvP players back, they do have no plans to bring back, the open world full loot PvP system. And they, really do intend to continue with this sort of new system with the factional war, the companies and sort of the land conquest, and trying to incentivize players to PvP. There is going to be sort of no open world full loop PvP. The game is not going to be going back to where it was, in the last alpha testing. I honestly don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. When they first made these changes, and shifted away, I was quite concerned. But I think as they've kind of built on the systems more and more, I'm really quite positive, about some of the changes they've made. And, I think both PvE and PvP players have got something to look forward to. On a side note, I honestly don't think anyone has ever said the words PvE and PvE quite so much in one video as I have in this one. I feel like I've said them 100 times. But anyway, finally, just before we wrap up, they did announce right at the bottom that they intend another big content drop in the alpha prior to its release into the beta. And in this they want to implement a couple of things. Specifically they want to be implementing magic, they want to be adding in more quests, as well as things like corrupted invasions, and as well as making the world much larger. I guess they've perhaps had certain areas locked, or they're intending to expand the size of the map. And if you haven't already, then I'd certainly recommend you give it a shot and sign up for the alpha. I'll put a link to the sign up sort of in the description and probably the comments of this video down below. There's a good chance you'll probably not get invited at all, but who knows, maybe they'll actually start to bring in much larger numbers of players into the alpha. So if you don't sign up, you'll never know and you'll never get a chance. So it's certainly worth giving it a bit of a shot. And that's really all we've got to cover in this video. I mean, that pretty much covers the article. I'll put a full link to the article in the description down below. There's going to be a ton of links in this description by now, but I will, so you can go and check it out and read it for yourself if you'd like to. We've also heard on Twitter, supposedly we are going to be getting another proper developer blog next week, which is going to be covering corrupted breaches, which I think will be kind of really interesting to see, something I'd like to learn a bit more about, because I think that's going to be one of those things that's going to be a bit more group orientated. And I know I'm planning on playing with sort of a guild, and I think these group activities are going to be really important to the game. And there also is going to be another developer diary, in video format. Hopefully a little bit longer than some of the last ones we've had, but this is supposedly going to be talking about combat. And I think that's an area that we really haven't seen very much on. We've got a couple of minutes of, PvP gameplay footage in a siege and a very small amount of PvE combat footage. So I'm really hopeful that this developer diary is going to throw a little bit of new gameplay footage at us. Because then hopefully we can get a bit of an idea of how the combat system's actually going to play. Because I know some people have been concerned it's going to be a bit clunky. Some people think it looks quite good. There's a real mix of opinions. So hopefully a further developer diary will sort of help clarify that up for us that little bit more. But anyway, hopefully that covers everything for today. If you do have any questions or comments or anything about the video, do let me know what you think in the comments down below. Of course, subscribe to the channel for a load more New World content. Thanks for watching, guys, and I shall see you all on the next video.